Billow Kerrow is a former senator of Mandera County. He's also been a member of the National Assembly. Mheshimiwa, welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you.
It's good to have you finally. I mean, we've been having these conversations. One time you're able to come, then something else comes up. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Is it true? Am I right when I say that members of parliament are the ones who are supposed to be checking on the implementation of the budget?
Yes, you are very right. The buck stops with them.
Yeah.
The members of parliament actually get quarterly expenditure reports from Treasury, which sets out how the money has been spent. Once the budget has been approved throughout the year, there'll be expenditure. So they get quarterly reports on how this money is being spent, whether they're spent according to the budget. And of course, ultimately, the auditor will do audit later, but they do that regularly. And even when the auditor does his audit, he submits the report to the parliament. So parliament, at the end of the day, its main responsibility is to provide oversight, and that is one of the key responsibilities of parliament, oversight over financial expenditure of the government. But the way budget is done, it's not like budget in your company or you would look back and say, how did we do last year's budget?
Right.
We had said we'll spend 100 million on this. How did we spend? No, they simply start from today and say what we want to do. They don't give a report to parliament on last year's budget. Yes, we had 3.3 trillion and we said we'll do ABCD. This is what we have done. There's no audit. There's no review of how the expenditures for last year. So when the minister or the CS gives his budget today, he'll essentially be rolling out his outlook for next year and his proposed expenditures for next year. He will not look back to what happened or how he spent the money. He expects that to be covered in the reports that have been submitted already reports. And the auditor's reports and those things.
It's incredulous, Billow. It's unbelievable that you want to plan forward with money that, in this case without, and not having a historical perspective of what happened just 12 short months ago, and say that, look, this is what we planned to do, we're not able to do it, and now because of that, maybe this is how we should now tread cautiously into the future, or then, go big in the future. How do you then say you will budget for the future, not having taken into consideration what happened just over the last year?
It's incredible, but that's what happens. And the question you raised, earlier, when you allocate money to a particular project, say an investment like SGR, and you told Kenyans we need to put 500-600 billion into SGR. Why? Or we expect some returns. In the next 5 years, we expect the economy to grow by this because of that SGR. We expect our cost of freight to be lower, production costs will reduce and will become more competitive, and ABCD, and you need to. And at the end of the day, you need to submit a report and say, following that investment we had put in, this is what the government has realized in terms of the returns. And there's no audit, really. This is government. They want to avoid a situation where they will be held to account on where they have not performed. And I'll give you a simple example. Forget even the SGR is complex. You remember we were told every child will be given a laptop.
Yeah.
And a lot of tens of billions were spent in that area.
There was budgetary allocation for that
you
project.
Remember? Yeah. If you ask today how many kids have got laptops and how did that program go, those guys who started that time started once with laptops. How far have they gone with their laptops? They'll tell you there'll be probably nothing. It has collapsed. Then there was the 1 million. Remember, Galana irrigation. They said we are going to put 1 million. Every year we were allocating 10-12 billion to that project. And so it's endless. Those things are designed, they are approved, the money is gone, but there's no audit to try and go back and look back and say, gentlemen, that investment was not a good one. And so this is the challenge with government. There's a lot of politics.
And yet, the law plus also parliamentary standing orders expect Parliament to do that, to play the oversight role. Like you're saying, before Ukuri Yatani gets the go-ahead to start planning on how to raise money to finance 3.3 trillion shillings, Parliament has already said, it's okay, 3.3 trillion shillings you can spend. So there should have been scrutiny. Where exactly is every shilling going? So with that, Parliament is already aware. It's not going to be caught off guard when the first quarterly report comes in and shows how the money has gone. Parliament already knows. So is it not a failure of Parliament to understand the job that they're supposed to be doing?
It's a big failure of Parliament. And look at the new constitution. It gives considerable amount of power and leverage to members of Parliament on budget. This is not like the old constitution. Parliament plays a critical role in the budget making. Forget about the approval. Even in the making. Everything that the government does, the budget policy papers, everything is submitted to them well in advance. So that in terms of the budget strategy, in terms of the government policy, all those things must be approved first by Parliament. And it's based on that policy and the strategy, that then the Treasury prepares the estimates. Say this is the area that we have been told, focus on this in terms of strategy, in terms of policy, and this is where we are going to focus on. So money will be allocated to that particular area. So that's why there is a parliamentary budget office. That's why Parliament spends a lot of time. I mean, there is nothing. That's why documents are available. These things have been, all the figures on how the government expects to or intends to spend had already been published, weeks earlier. So because it has already gone through the Parliament. So, but where politics plays the center stage. Everything in this country, in Parliament, is about politics. And you've seen what is happening. Parliament has become an appendage of the executive. So they will do what the executive wants. At the end of the day, it's not really. When did you see the last time Parliament saying, sorry, this one we have rejected. This tax measure we are not approving. This expenditure has been declined. Treasury go back, cancel that expenditure. It's not very common, even if it's there.
Well, then it seems as if we're swimming in extremely dangerous and murky waters here. Because if a budget-making process has been made political, which is, clearly, that's what we are even looking at now, whether the process the pre-process, the budget itself, and then the checking and oversight of how money was spent, or if projects actually were implemented, economy stimulated kind of thing. And that does not happen in the manner in which it ought to be happening. What are we saying then for the country? Where can you really say you are if the thing that's supposed to run the country then is being used, or rather is being sacrificed on the altar of politics?
Are you surprised? Look at it this way. We have had, this budget is 3.3, expenditure is 3.3 trillion. In the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, it's been above 3 trillion.
Yep.
That's, it will tell you in the last 5 years alone, it's 15 trillion. That's an awful lot of money. I mean, if you try and find out how many, projects or development projects really, or activities that have been implemented in the last 5 years with that kind of money, because that's a huge amount of money, you'll not find much. I'm telling you. You'll be told SGR 1, SGR 2, and SGR 3 probably, and you'll struggle to get another major. So it's about misplaced priorities, really, at the end of the day. And this is why, despite all the money we're spending, you're told the number of Kenyans with clean water supply, it's still around 35%. The number of Kenyans who even have access to toilets, you find a situation where medicines are not available in hospitals. There are a lot of challenges. Our kids, you've seen schools that are in situations where, in conditions that sometimes you get surprised. You found the last 3, 4, 5 months, tens of thousands of animals have died for lack of, and people are dying for lack of food. And we have 3 trillion shillings. I mean, it's an awful lot of money. If you count how much money has been, and I like counting it, what this Jubilee administration has spent in the last 10 years. I can tell you, it's crazy. It's almost 30 to 40 trillion shillings. And it's huge, and just 40
trillion shillings.
It is huge amount of money
in just the
10 years.
In 10 years, 40 trillion shillings. Are we
20
actually saying
9
it is
years,
not possible to
Senator.
see in 9 years? It's not possible to see
30 to 40 trillion. Because
what 40
if your
trillion
budget
shillings
is
has done in the
3
country.
trillion plus in a year, that you ought to have done a lot in terms of addressing food security. Today we have a serious challenge in terms of food security in this country, and you know that. Many Kenyans dying for lack of food. All our foods, agricultural sectors all of them are literally in crisis. Coffee, tea, things like sugar has collapsed, maize. You talk about every sector in this country, livestock, fisheries. Tell me one sector that has grown to a point where we say we are very proud now. We are the largest exporters of coffee in the, in East Africa, or we are exporting our fish to EU countries, or we are doing, livestock. Somalia, I've just mentioned earlier in another program, a country with no government. They export over 10 million heads of livestock annually. And Kenya's numbers is 1/10 of what Somalia exports, or half of what Ethiopia exports. And we are very, I think our country's problem is what I've said, is about misplaced priorities. And of course, and mismanagement of resources. These two combined have been our Achilles heels.
So it's proper corruption, because when you talk about all that money, misplaced priorities, misallocation, misappropriated, it's just
the word is
theft.
not only corruption. I think I always use better words. It's poor leadership and bad governance. That's what it is, amounts to. I mean, if you don't put your money in the right place, it's about management. It's about leadership. It's about governance. It's not. Yeah, you may be putting the money, but you're putting it. That's the examples I've mentioned to you earlier of those projects which never took off, where money has been allocated. Now, when SGR came in, the intention was good. They said, we used to be the industrial hub for Eastern Central Africa. We became became less competitive, and because of high cost of freight, high cost of energy. So a lot of money was allocated, tens of billions every year for energy. To generate power from geothermal sources, which is the cheapest source of energy and clean. A lot of money was then spent on SGR to reduce the cost of freight and so forth. But let me ask any of the manufacturers, and they'll tell you the cost of energy has not gone down, it went up over the year. And you know that even from your household. It has only gone up. It doesn't look down at all.
No.
And the cost of freight has been the same, despite putting, every year we are spending hundreds of billions in infrastructure. But still, that's why now we are importing more from Uganda than exporting. It was our largest export destination. Our largest export trade partner in the world was Uganda. Today, we are importing more from them than
the balance of trade has shifted.
Tanzania, where they used to import everything from toothpaste to flour. Today, nothing. If you go to Namanga border, the trucks are only coming in. They're not going out.
Going out. And actually, that's true.
I mean, it's a fact. Because government has really not prioritized in terms of its investment, so that they can provide, conducive business environment to our businesses, so that we can be competitive.
Right.
So then we are just putting money in where we think it is right. The leader wakes up and say, "I wanted this project, and I wanted that." So he'll try. Years down the road, the money will have been spent, and then the project fails, and they say, "Okay, we move on.
We tried. We'll start something else."
We are on course to realizing that project.
Yeah.
It's 8:30. Let's take this break. Mheshimiwa Billow Kerrow, former senator of Mandera County, is with us in the studio. We're talking about budget and where money should actually be spent when you talk about, every year's financial budget.
This is the Situation Room.
With you in the room is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko, and Billow Kerrow, former senator of Mandera County. He's with us. Mheshimiwa, you are a finance professional. You therefore would also be a Treasury CS, with the right president in office. You can easily be the Treasury CS. Today, if you are the Treasury CS and you are the one presenting a budget for the next financial year, 22-23, what would your priority areas be for expenditure?
A tough question. When things have already been messed up, the first thing you would do is to try and
undo the mess.
Undo the mess, and it's not something that can be done in one budget. This is something that has happened over the years. But the single, in my view, biggest problem we've had in this country with regards to treasury, which I would be concerned about, is public expenditure. I would focus on how to reduce public expenditure, because if you reduce public expenditure, then you would reduce borrowing. If you reduce borrowing, you reduce taxes. I mean, it's common sense. If you and I mentioned earlier, look at it. You are spending 3.3 trillion, and you are saying your revenue is 2 trillion. If it's 1.3 deficit, 1.3 trillion you have to borrow. Nobody gives you free money. It's a loan.
Yep.
So even as you talk of how to deal with the people you have already. So me, I would focus on reducing public expenditure. This government is living beyond its means. We live, I mean, you walk to any government offices. I mean, government is really spending money unnecessarily. There are many things that are done, and I would really take a pencil. And this is why we said a few years ago we introduced program-based budgeting. Let's have a zero-based budget. Let's take a pen and pencil and work out what you need. Don't just take the previous budget and then say plus. There's
Inflationary
I just add.
adjustments.
So the same. So there are many ways in which we are really spending money. This is a government that does everything.
What would you cut on then?
I mean, it's mostly in expenditures in the recurrent area where the government is living really conspicuously well. I mean, the government spends a lot of money on travel. The government spends a lot of money on consultancies and other related those kind of expenses. The government spends huge amounts of money on trying to do, particularly financing so many activities in various state corporations. You would be surprised that there are nearly 300-400 state corporations, from taxis, owning a company that runs a taxi, to anything, to another one that wants to put up a nuclear energy. So it's the things which are not a priority. You have this. I have the cheapest source of energy, geothermal, cheapest anywhere else in the world, and we have unlimited. Why do I want to spend billions trying to think about a nuclear? So I would say, really, it's possible for me to take the estimates and go through ministry by ministry, state office by state office, department, and reduce some of the expenditures and save money. That is the thing which they promise every year. If you look at today's budget, the first thing the minister will say, or the CS, is that I'm going to cut down that deficit. It's always around 9-10%. It says every year its pledges will bring it down to 6%, 5%, and then he's going to repeat it. They won't do it because nobody wants to touch any ministry. My ministry, I want to keep things the way they are. Another area that I will reduce, which is very important, is after devolution. The essence of devolution was to devolve functions down to the counties. And we did that. For example, in health, according to the Constitution, 95% of the health functions had been devolved, except for these referral hospitals, 3 of them in Nairobi. And the ministry was supposed to be just for policy. But today, I can assure you, nothing has changed. The same Ministry of Health that was there in 2002 is the same one that is there today, and they're getting even more money. They'll get tens of billions, nearly close to 60-70 billion.
Just for
water, and so you end up duplicating. And I'll give you a good example in water. All those regional water boards, even as you speak now, they're supposed to have been devolved. So national government doesn't want to devolve things. They want to hold on to some of those functions. So then what happens is we allocate tens of billions to those organizations. And you see them duplicating the same thing that happens in the counties. They want to put up some water ponds. National government is putting up, CDF is putting up, county is putting up. So there's a lot of duplication also within government because, of the way the functions have not been streamlined, and where the functions have, because national government wants to keep their role. The president and the ministers want to go to an area and say, I'm launching this road, I'm launching this project, I want this dam, I want to do that. So because they want to do that, they still allocate huge amounts of money to areas where those functions have actually devolved to the counties.
But do you think, Mheshimiwa, if you are the CS and you had a political head called the president and you have political colleagues in the cabinet and everything else around you, you would actually be able to say, let us cut back, let us reduce the money that we are allocating to the Ministry of Health because they are not doing the function of implementation, they are only a policy? Would you be able to? Realistically speaking.
That is why, Eric, I have no intention of joining government, because you will not be given that latitude. It's not easy to get a leader who will allow his CS Treasury or any of his other CSs to do, to give an independent advice. Of course, you can. You can, as a CS, say, look, Mr. President, this is what we want to do. And this is where we should be going. This should be the direction. Let us not be spending money. We can cut down. Instead of increasing this budget to 3.3 trillion, let's reduce it to 2.5 trillion. and let's try and cut down and live so that we can save money and don't borrow again. But not many people can do. But I can assure you, there are people who, if they are given that opportunity, can tell the president, no, I want to do that. If you're not willing to, then I don't think I'll be able to keep this job. I mean, but in the way our politics is, the expectation is that you will do what the boss wants. You don't do it, then you'll be accused of being somebody who is whatever. So, that's where the challenge is.
It seems almost criminal to me, though, Billow, that here you are having been presented with a job to do.
Correct.
You know what it is from the get-go,
Yeah.
right? Whether it is of political persuasion or whether it is actually of technical know-how and expertise, you know what it is that you're supposed to do. When we put this responsibility in the hands of Parliament, then for you to be able to oversight and then ask questions later and legislate and then oversight and say, look, money then was allocated, money was spent, did we see? If we did not see, this is what we suggest ought to happen. Those processes do not take place. Right? You have budgeting for a country that is done void of priority. And you have people who have been put in place to get it done. But then people are only operating at the behest of the leader. In this case, because many say they've been captured, many flowery words have been used. Doesn't it appear criminal to you that you have an opportunity to do the job that you have been given to do, but you don't do it because you're trying to please one side? It seems like a circus to me.
It's not just politicians, by the way. Even in the executive, in the CSs and so forth. I mean, look, we had top brains who have joined government, but you wonder what happens when people join government. Then you find you have an opportunity to tell the leader that, no, this is not right. I don't think I need to borrow this money. I need to do this finance this way, or we need to hold on this project. We need to do this. We need to do that. But unfortunately, this country, our leaders, whether it's in executive or in parliament, are driven by self-interests. The moment you have been given that opportunity, you're looking at, what do I get? You want, the boss wants A, B, C, D? Yes, okay. Boss, I'll do. But you also want X, Y, Z. You're looking at your interest.
Yeah.
So then you want to always play ball. And this, unfortunately, has happened in parliament in the last 10 years. I'm telling you, the situation has got worse in parliament. Because the role of a member of parliament, when you are elected, is to represent the interest of your people. That's number one. It's representative. Representation is the key. If you're not allocated, I'm not approving this budget.
Right.
You are carrying out your role effectively. But we have seen in the last few years where people have actually gone in opposite direction. They say, no, forget about mine. I am approving this budget for the love of my president. You saw it in parliament, literally using those words.
Yeah.
Doing things because you want to please the boss, and that is what you are. And you wonder then, why did the person go to parliament in the first place? And this is the challenge we're having. It's the leadership. It's the leadership at all levels. But I think, frankly speaking, this I have seen, this metamorphosis, you'll see it when somebody leaves even the private sector and joins government, and you say, now this is somebody different. This guy was running and something, technocrat has joined government and something will happen. But the next day he says, no, I'm waiting for advice from the president. The president has asked me to do ABCD. I will not do this because the president has not said so. We will only do so. I mean, it's and this is a collective responsibility. You are there as an advisor. Everybody who is an executive is an advisor to the government. You're supposed to tell the president, this is what we want to go forward in your cabinet. Have a dynamic situation, where you say, no, this boss doesn't work. I have a better idea. But unfortunately, self-interest seems to drive our nation more than anything else. And so when tomorrow you get into government,
things will change. Our government, even the constitution said, okay, let's bring in technocrats who join government so that they are able to offer proper advice to the president, the political leadership of the country on how best. This government, and even in the previous government of 2013 to 2017, if you look at just the resumes of the people who are in government, people who are heading, somebody was heading an Africa head of a commercial bank. Somebody else heading a local commercial bank, doing very well. They are in government. CEO of a lobby, a business lobby. They're in government, but like Mheshimiwa, you're saying, they all sit back and say, I'm waiting for the president to offer direction on what to go. I want to ask the next question, which is, this is not Uhuru Kenyatta's budget. I mean, he's not the one who's going to implement this budget.
Yeah.
The next administration is going to implement this budget. But it's being presented, obviously, by the current administration. Have you heard any conversation from the would-be new administrations saying what they'd like to see in the budget, saying, even critiquing the budget policy statement when it was taken to Parliament, the estimates, which have not been very, very public this time, and all? Have you heard, for example, from the Raila Odinga camp or the William Ruto camp on, this is the kind of budget I'd like to inherit, and these are the kind of programs that I'd like to be financed in the first financial year of my administration?
What I have actually heard from each of them, both Raila and Ruto, is that come September 1st, when they have been elected, because each one, of course, says I'll be elected, September 1st, NHIF, you'll all have free NHIF cover and you'll never. Come 1st September, I remember Baba said on 1st September, Mumia's sugar and those sugar things in Western, they are going to be, the money for that will be there in September. To Tanzania, by December, those things will be up and running. By September, 6,000 shillings will be given to every Kenyan.
Yeah,
but let me tell you,
100 billion shillings for youth,
for youth,
50 billion for SMEs.
So the thing is, the budget is going to be read. And the president supports one side.
Yeah.
So I would expect that the president would at least, if he wants to help his brother, for example, Baba, to put the 6,000 shillings Baba has talked about in this budget, so that at least we can see.
At least.
There's more money for
Yeah,
social
so that
protection.
Kenyans who are not employed will start collecting their 6,000 after September if Baba comes in. Or that there will be money that Baba has talked about for reviving the sugar industries. Or I mean, you expect at least, you would say this side is at least, talking to government, so you'd expect something. But I can tell you for sure, the budget policy statement has been out, and the strategy papers and all those things which guide the estimates. So I don't expect really any miracle to come out of those estimates. I mean, clearly already how government plans to spend has already been laid out. So when you stand out there and tell Kenyans from September, this is what happened, it's not already in the budget.
You talked about crisis in leadership.
Yeah.
And this is pointing us to we are going to inherit the same kind of leadership. If Raila and Ruto have not talked about the budget policy statement, the budget estimates, the policy of the finance of the budget that they're going to inherit, what does that tell us? Does that tell us that, don't they have any way of even making a comment? Release a statement and say, you know what, the National Treasury's policy statement looks to be going this way, but no, we would like, and we're actually going to rally our members to shoot down any direction that does not go in our direction. We're not hearing any of these conversations.
No, Eric, you are expecting too much from our leaders. Our leaders are the same. We have not got some new leadership. These guys have been in government, in and out, for the last 20, 30 years. You don't expect any change. And they know, even as they speak in those public rallies, that whatever they're speaking is not here. But they expect you and I, Gali Boland, will not remember those things.
Right.
Of course. They expect that we will not be looking at those things they're saying out there literally. And you'll simply walk away. And so, they don't need to look at the documents. They don't need to look at the budget because everything is there. All the things that are going to be done is already in the budget policy documents which have been published. How much money is going to be given. For example, it says
to healthcare.
The government will give 1.5 billion to the drought-stricken counties, 23 counties with tens of millions of people. You want to give 1.5 billion.
Only 1.5
They have
billion.
lost already animals worth 30 billion in the last 3 months. I mean, it's a joke. But when you speak, so they have not looked at, and they don't need to, because they know you and I will not really take their words literally, and you will not remember what they said after you leave the venue.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, shroud it however you want to. I mean, these are lies that are being told to Kenyans. Because if you're going to say you're going to do 1, 2, 3, and we already have a budget, I mean, more or less, that is out, right? Those things having not been catered for in said budget already, then wouldn't it be wise to say that if you have somebody who is telling you things against the facts, you can see the two don't meet, then you have no business listening to them.
I'm telling you, you see, if I was Baba today and I had a friend like the president, I can get some things done that can give me mileage in my campaigns. I can tell my friend, Sikiza, budget, there are things I have talked about.
Yeah.
There are things which I want to do.
Make sure they're there.
Can you put 1 or 2 of them? I can stand out there and say, folks, yes, this is what I'm going to do. It is there. You don't see it in the budget. This is what I'm going to do if you elect me. But you see, the way politics, because politics, there's always uncertainty. You don't know who's going to come in. The other party can also say, I'm the one who's going to do that. So I think, unfortunately, we have our politics, to a large extent, has not been issue-based. It's the first time that in the politics of this country, campaigns, people seem to be talking about the economy, bottom up, top up, technical terms, but no one has given anything substantive, really, in terms of economic policy that you can look at and say, yes, this party, if they get to power, this is their blueprint for the economy, and this is how they're going to change. When we take power, we are going to do this. It's easy. I've seen others who have said, when we come in, tax to Tatoa. Amwezi kulipa hii tax ya aina hii. You not pay this, you not pay that. But those are gimmicks. But in terms of really something substantive that you can put down, because for example, I'll give you a simple example: the 8% tax on petrol, VAT, the VAT.
Yeah.
It came in when IMF insisted, when the government wanted that, $1 billion from IMF, and they said, okay, we'll give you a condition, please put VAT.
Bring VAT so you can raise some money.
You can raise the money. I mean, if you say, I'm going to remove that, then, somewhere in Washington, you'll be told, sorry, my friend. That's a condition. It's not happening. This is why, as we speak now, and I keep saying, the liter of petrol, which is 134 in Nairobi, about 73 shillings is government taxes and levies. 73 shillings out of that 100. So instead of government struggling to look for money to give to petrol stations as a subsidy, subsidize the price, they can say, okay, no, there's no point. Why do I collect from you and then bring it back as a subsidy? Don't pay VAT. Don't pay excise duty, 24 shillings, 25 shillings per litre, which you're paying. Don't pay petroleum development. Don't pay railway. You're paying railway development. So there are many ways, but they can't, because some of those things have been put in by institutions that gave you that 10 trillion which you have borrowed.
So there's external factor as
There's
well
external factor,
in his
yes.
budget.
Yes,
And we cannot...
you misbehaved, and there's a price. You borrowed, and so there's a price you have to pay. Oh yes, there's no free lunch.
Indeed. There's no interrogation, unfortunately. If we're looking at it from the citizens' end, there's no interrogation of these things. It comes like, there's this wind, this euphoria, and then everybody's just kind of like, up and enjoying it. But there's no questioning and saying, these things that you promise, this budget that you're making, clearly you don't have the money for it. How are you going to run the country? We have people who are hungry. We have people who are suffering from the effects of drought. We have a healthcare system that's on its knees. What are we looking at in terms of cancer patients for today in Kenya right now? And I keep coming back to that. There's no interrogation of the same, and there is no expectation of interrogation either. I mean, those who are sitting in these positions, they know that Kenyans will not ask. They know Kenyans will not interrogate. How would you suggest, that even this interrogation takes place, even if it were to start asking questions?
You elected representatives to interrogate for you. There are people you elected and send them to parliament, ideally. Ideally, that's what happens in every other country in the world. Your elected representatives are the ones who should do that work for you. They look at every piece of legislation. They look at the budget. They look at every development project, every proposal. If it is a laptop, it goes to the story of laptop for kids. It goes to parliament for approval. So everything is done, supposed to have been done by your elected. Where these people either lack the capacity or have been influenced one way or the other, and not to look at those things critically, then that's where the failure is. And let me say also this: I think Kenyans also, as people, sometimes take the blame, because nobody wants somebody serious. I mean, I remember the election in 2017. For example, the governor in Nairobi, there were serious people like Jim Nambaru and others who were running. How many votes did they get? or you get Mother Karua running for president. How many times? How many votes did she get?
Right.
Nobody wants you. Also, if you are, what people want, it's sometimes
Populists.
that populist, name. Today, if a very sharp Kenyan who's got the capacity and everything comes up to stand for president, I can assure you, if he's not known in terms of the politics, they'll say, "Oh, sorry, my friend." So that is the challenge. I mean, we don't elect people on the basis of their integrity. We don't elect on the basis of their knowledge, of the economic, and whatever. We look at, other factors, and this is where the challenge. And so the political class has seen this, and so our MPs have also seen it. That's why our MPs don't have to go and represent you. They go and represent their interests.
Because they know
at the end of the day, when I go back to the constituency, what do you want? I will give out some little money.
I'll come to your funeral.
And you don't have any issue. At the end of the day, so to a large extent, to some extent, I would say the people also play a role. And in countries where democracies work and people are well informed of their rights, you cannot get away with some things. You'll be held to account.
That's true.
You cannot vote for a VAT 8% on my fuel and tomorrow come to me for a vote. I'll tell you, sorry, my friend. Did
It's
you consult
about
me? Why did you do
Why
that?
didn't you
Accountability starts with the people.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa, thank you very much for joining us today. Billow Kerrow is a former senator of Mandera County. He's been with us throughout this hour. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be talking about what we expect to see in the financial, in the budget that's going to be presented by CS for the National Treasury, Ukur Yatani, in Parliament today. Come again soon, Mheshimiwa.
Thank you very much.